10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What a very, very good afternoon. Hi, guys. It's Cassim, and welcome to another session of Notes on the Topic of. And today I wanted to talk to you on the subject, and I wanted to share with you some notes on the subject of men just don't think. I want to firstly start off by saying a massive, massive thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I want to take the time to really show my gratitude to you for you spending the next kind of hour with me as I, share with you some of the notes that I have made on this topic of men simply do not think. And I'm really, really hoping that some of the things that I share with you today can help you to become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. I'm really hoping that perhaps one of the things that I say today can be insightful for you. Maybe might get you to think, might get you to maybe have a revelation in your life, perhaps point your life in a slightly different direction to the way that it's been going. So I'm keen to see if I can say something or share with you something that can help you get onto that stepping stone. So you'll see me looking down a fair bit because I have made quite a lot of notes because I'm trying to get as many of these notes that I've made, that I've been thinking about this subject as possible. So you'll have to excuse me if you see me looking down, because I want to remember as much of these notes that I've made so that I can add as much value into your life as I possibly can. But let's get into it. So as I mentioned earlier on, the subject that I want to share some notes with you on is this subject of men just don't think. Many years ago, and I'm talking about 6.5 years ago, leading up to 7 years ago, when I first started on my journey of self-development, of wanting to improve my life, of wanting to be a better human being, of wanting to be a better citizen, of wanting to be a better member of the community which I occupied, I heard a speech by a guy called Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale in the personal development world is who is considered to be the father of personal development. This is kind of the man who revolutionized personal development as we know it today. And he shared a message which he called the strangest secret and the strangest secret in the world. And in it, he talked about a man, a professor actually, a doctor, a guy called Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who was asked a question. And the question that that doctor was asked is, they asked the doctor, what is the problem with men today? And the doctor was quiet for a moment, and then he replied by saying that the problem with men today, in his era, in his time, is that men simply do not think. And that is really what I want to talk to you about, because I've come to the conclusion and the conviction that we have the same problem today. In 2021, we are experiencing the same problem that Dr. Albert Schweitzer was experiencing and was witnessing with his generation. Because we live in a world, and I very strongly believe this, where many of you guys who are listening to me, you're super talented. We know it. You know that you're talented. Of course, you may not know in which way to manifest your gift or to manifest your talents, or how to really kind of use your resources at their full expansion and their full scale. But the reality of life is that you are talented, that you do have the capacity to change other people's lives. And yet, I'm finding that so many people aren't doing it. So of course my question was why? Why don't people live these incredible lives? And I eventually managed to find that part of the reason why people don't live these incredible lives is in part because most people just are lacking a sense of belief in themselves. Many of us are lacking a foundation which is strong enough to be able to withstand the challenges which would come as a result of actually daring to dream, of actually daring to wanting to change the world, of actually daring to want to improve our community, improve the lives of our family, change some of the family cycles that have been running prevalent in our families. In order to do that, there is a certain consequence. There is a price which has to be paid. And I realize that many of you guys who are listening to me, you haven't had the right foundation in order to be able to establish that, so that you can actually have a strong enough foundation so that when you go to change your family's tree, when you go to change the community, your community, when you go to try and change the world, you will be okay. In other words, you would have this belief within yourself that you have the ability to figure things out, that no matter what goes wrong in your universe, no matter what obstacles are put in front of you, you can withstand the battle that is coming towards you. You can withstand whatever is going to try and break you. You will overcome it. And so I was listening to Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, I was actually at the time studying individuals who changed the world. And one of my questions was, I want to try and understand, why is it that some individuals have the capacity and are able to change the world, change their world, change their family's world, change their community's world, when other people seem to not be able to, even though they do have that capacity? What's going on? Why are all our men today, which are all nice individuals, they're all talented, they all have the capacity to manifest incredible versions of themselves, what's going on? Why are not many of our men today going out there and changing the world? And so as I was listening to Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King Jr. said some things in a speech on October the 26th, 1967, to a bunch of junior high school students in Philadelphia. And he entitled the speech, "What is in your life's blueprint?" And that life's blueprint is what I wanted to set today as a foundation for what I wanted to talk to you about on this subject of men just don't think. And so let's begin with what he talked about. So he began the speech off by saying, actually by asking a question. And he said, what is in your life's blueprint? So let's stop right there and begin with that question, because I think that question is so important that most people would miss it if they didn't pay attention. That question of what is in your life's blueprint is asking you, what is your expectation for your life? You know, I've always said to people that I very strongly believe that in life, as a general rule, I believe that the world, people within your community, people within the UK, within the world, expect two things from all of us. Number one, they expect that we do not kill another human being. That is an expectation of every human being on this planet. We expect, do not try and take the life of another human being. It's an expectation that across the globe all of us can agree on. The second thing that I absolutely believe that every human being expects is, we expect that everybody pay their taxes. Right? We don't think that it's fair just because you earn more money than I do that you don't pay your taxes. We don't think that it's fair that just because I earn more money than you do and you earn less money than me, that you should get away with not paying no taxes. In other words, we, all of us across the entire globe, all believe those two things. Number one, don't try to take the life of another human being or succeed in it. And secondly, just pay your taxes. Beyond that, most people, we don't expect very much more from you, right? From ourselves. In fact, I would very strongly say that perhaps your parents are the only people in your life who really expect anything greater for you. You know, many of us have parents who perhaps want us to be successful, they want us to be happy, they want us to have children, to have a family. But even beyond that, they don't really expect anything greater than that for ourselves. So the responsibility then really falls with us. If we are going to do anything of consequence in our lives, is going to have to be a result of us. We are going to have to make the decision to actually make something of our lives. And so the question then begs to ask, and this is why I ask you this very question, is bearing in mind that you know that the world doesn't really expect very much from you. Your parents just kind of want you to be happy. What do you expect from your life? Have you ever sat down and actually defined for yourself what even is life supposed to be all about? What does a good life mean? Am I even just heading for a good life? Do I want to achieve greatness? Do I want an amazing life? Do I want a peaceful life? Have you ever sat down and actually defined for yourself what it is that you define a life to be? Meaning, when you get to the end of your life, what should your life have looked like? What do you, in your belief system, in your conviction, believe that the world should look like, believe that the world should be like? Because a lot of males, a lot of us guys have never actually thought about this question, right? In fact, I was listening, part of that Strangest Secret in the World speech that I mentioned to you earlier on, one of the things that Elle Nightingale talks about is that there is a study which was conducted where they started going around and asking males, why do you go to work? And if I drum the numbers down, for every 10 males that they ask, why do you go to work? 9 of them said, well, because everybody goes to work, because I have to make a living, right? Now, I would conjecture and say that actually in today's time, 2021, once you take care of your basic needs, and I mean water, toilet, housing, having being able to have access to food, once you take care of that, that isn't really very much money. I mean, I would argue and say that to have those basic necessities would probably every month cost the average person in the UK something about 500 quid. Beyond that, everything else is kind of extra. It's a surplus. And so my question is, if it only costs about, give or take, £500 to really take care of your rent, to take care of you getting some food, right? To have access to a toilet, somewhere to wash, and everything else beyond that is just simply surplus. It's just whatever it is, which is whatever standard you hold for yourself, right? Because we know that some people may say, for me to live a good life, or to even have as a bare minimum, I expect to have a car, right? Some people might say that. But of course, we know that a car isn't considered as a necessity. It isn't a basic human right, a basic human need that all of us need. It's something which is extra. My question would be, why then do you go to a job that perhaps you don't like, that where it doesn't bring you fulfillment, where you don't feel as though you're making a contribution? Why? Have you ever even thought about that question? Because the reality of life is that a lot of people have never thought about that question. A lot of people have never sat down and said, what do I actually expect from my life? And I just want you to think about that, because I think so many of the depression, so many of the problems that are occurring against the male species at the moment is coming from the space and from the lack of foundation where many of us have never defined for ourselves what we want from our lives. We've never defined what success is. Many of us have grown up in households where our parents have told us what success is. Many of us have grown up in a household where our lives have been determined, and people have told us what a good life is supposed to look like. You know, it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of research on various topics, and recently I was studying Britney Spears, and Britney Spears was a really interesting person for me to study, because when I've been studying Britney Spears, one of the things that I found has led to her demise, obviously an individual who's clearly very talented, was the fact that in the early part of her life, Britney Spears' life was controlled by everybody. right? Britney Spears' life, she was told where to go, what to do, how to behave. Every area of her life was controlled by somebody. And many of us, and I genuinely believe this to be very strong, that strongly. Many of us have grown up in households where the reality of life is that we have not been brought up by parents who are conscious enough to be able to play one of the most vital roles that a parent is supposed to play. I believe that one of the roles of a parent is to nurture their children's gift, is to nurture their children's talent, is to basically expose their child to everything that so that they can figure out what does my child like? Where is my child's leaning towards? Is my child more towards performing? Is my child more leans towards things like the army, where there's a lot of discipline and a lot of structure? Is my child somebody who's very articulate, has a lot of charisma? Does my child learn better in a classroom, or do they learn better when they have something to create, something where they have to think outside the box? Is my child a leader, or is my child more somebody who likes to have a small department where they have a small role and they can make a really huge contribution in that marketing department or in that organization or in that role, wherever they are, right? It may be somebody who is the dry cleaners who cleans the football kit for a local club, and they don't want to be this chairman, they don't want to be part of the club, they don't want to be the manager, but they just want to clean the clothing for the football club within the local community, and that's their part, right? And the reality is, most of us haven't grown up in families where our parents are attuned enough to themselves to actually be able to pay attention to where we're at. And so as a result of that, it actually befalls to us to determine for ourselves. Because if you're not lucky enough to have parents who are attuned to you, who know where your leaning is, and you never get to the point in your life where you decide for yourself, okay, what do I actually want? Okay, what does constitute a good life? Okay, where do I seem to lean towards? Whenever I fail, what do I seem to be doing? Whenever I feel a lack of motivation, what seems to be the pattern? How does that day seem to be like? If you don't actually go ahead and do that for yourself, you will end up getting into resentment. You will end up operating from a space where you resent people, right? And I was looking up some information regarding resentment. Resentment's a very funny word, because when I was looking up this word resentment is where in fact, I wrote down some things here. Let me see if I've got the thing here. Resentment is a mixture of disappointment, disgust, anger, and fear. It's interesting for me because, and I'm actually going to get back to this point. Let me come back to this point because I think this is going to be more related to a point later on that I want to make regarding your self-worth. But I absolutely believe deep down that resentment is one of the single biggest relational crises in Britain at the moment. And I'm going to get back to that statement a little bit later on. But the first thing and the first note which I really wanted to drum to you is, have you actually thought about what you expect from your life? Have you actually thought about what you want, where you want to go, what you want to achieve, who you want to become, what contribution you want to make in your life, what is success, what is failure, what is good, what is bad? There is a reason why I'm constantly recommending to you guys that you get yourself a journal. And I'm not recommending it because it's something that I think is fun or some amazing thing that I've read in a book. I do it because I understand the significance and the advantages that it does and the role that it plays when you have the ability to look at your life from a kind of an ego point of view. And a lot of us, we've never looked at our own lives. We've never examined ourselves. And one of the things that I think is really important, particularly in examining ourselves, is examining where do we fall short. Because the reality is, many of us fall short in many areas. Many of us are making errors in judgment, and we don't even know that we're making errors in judgment. There is a saying that says you cannot look at the picture when you're in the frame. And so by journaling, you allow yourself to step outside of yourself to see your life from a bird's eye point of view. By journaling, you're able to determine for yourself, okay, what is success? What's good? What is evil? What are my convictions? What's my mission? And the reality is, a lot of men have never thought about this. And if you actually, it's interesting. Let me take this further. It's interesting because I've spent a lot of time looking at religious places of worship. So mosques, churches, synagogues. And I've been curious as to the attendance and who attends these places. And I can share with you that the majority of people who go to the mosque, who go to to church, who go to synagogues are not males, but they're females. And I wondered, okay, fine, that's okay, but why are so many women going to these places? Why? Why are so many? And I found that it's because a lot of women are lost. There are odds with their males, with their partners, because they don't know what more that they can do. Their men, and here's a word that I hear a lot from women telling me. They say that their males are immature, right? What does immature means? Immature means that the individual has grown in age, but their emotional state, their wisdom, their knowledge, right? Their ability to make decisions hasn't developed in an equal measure. In other words, the man is spending more time on his PS2 and his PS4 and his PS5 on playing golf on the weekend than playing with his children, than building a relationship with his missus, by building a better communication with his missus, right? And you think, well, how can you be 35 and when you go home, your first thought is to get on the PlayStation instead of asking your missus how she is, instead of spending some time with your child and creating that bond, right? And a lot of males that's why so many women end up in churches, because they don't know what to do, right? The man doesn't want to go to counseling. The man isn't the leader of the home. The women have this absolutely remarkable ability, and it's been fascinating for me to look at this, but women have this remarkable ability to step up. If you need a woman might want to be a stay-at-home mum, but if she needs to step up and go get a job so that the family can be where it needs to get to, women will do it, right? It's interesting. I was studying the Yorkshire Ripper recently. And if you know anything about the Yorkshire Ripper, one of the things that you will know about him is that he killed a lot of prostitutes because he wanted to get rid of prostitutes. And as I was studying these prostitutes, I was wondering, why did these women end up becoming prostitutes? And when you start delving into these individual women who he killed, many of these women who became prostitutes were mothers. They had children, actually, many of the prostitutes. And part of the reason why they ended up in prostitution wasn't because they desired to become prostitutes, but they had no other choice but to figure out a way to feed their children. And the only way that they could figure this out in, I think it was the 70s leading up to the 80s, was with no lack of jobs. Even men didn't have jobs in those days, right? Is they had to turn to prostitution. And it just shows you the versatility and the strength that women have in the desire to provide for their family. And I'm wondering whether we as males today in 2021 have that kind of desire. You know, I work with men who complain to me about how they don't have a job. And I say, well, okay, if you don't have a job, why don't you go and do Pizza Hut? Why don't you go and become a cleaner? Why don't you go and do Deliveroo? And they look at me as if I'm a nutcase. They look at me as if they are above becoming a pizza driver. And I'm thinking, no, as a man, it is your role to provide for your family, right? You have to step up. And a lot of these women, this is a problem that they face. Their men are not stepping up. There's a lot of males, as we know, the highest rate of suicide is amongst men from 16 to 25. And a lot of men They have mental health problems, but they're not stepping up and doing whatever is required to overcome those mental issues. They're just moaning and complaining. Now, of course, we all have problems. We all are going to have struggles in different areas of our lives. But it's our responsibility to step up and start to answer. Why am I depressed? Why do I get anxious? Why don't I know at 30 what I want to do with my life? It is our responsibility. We can't keep going around blaming everybody. I love what J.K. Rowling once said. J.K. Rowling once said that there is an expiry date on blaming your parents for steering you in the wrong direction. The moment you're old enough to take the steering wheel, it is your responsibility to take over. Meaning that many of you guys out there, you're listening to me right now, and there's many problems. You lack money, you aren't in a job that you really want to do, maybe you're suffering from depression, anxiety, a lot of tiredness, perhaps you haven't been able to find yourself a relationship. Well, your job is to step up and go and figure that out. Become a problem solver, become a student, become a lion. Develop that mindset of attacking things which are problems to you instead of being buckled by them. You know, many people really underestimate the strength of the human spirit. Many of you guys who are listening to me, you keep underestimating how strong you actually are. You think that you can just be broken like this. Human beings cannot just be broken, particularly men. We don't just get broken so easily. When I looked at this research and the data of what it actually takes to break the human will, man, I mean, for somebody to actually break is a very difficult thing to do. And I think that we've grown up in this world where so many of us, we've never exercised anything that causes us pain. Most of us have grown up in a world where any time that we meet resistance, that we meet a challenge, most of us cower and step away. In fact, I think many of us say, well, clearly if it's that hard, it isn't meant to be. No. It's that hard because you're supposed to prove that you're worthy of it. You've heard of that saying that goes, to whom much is given, much is required, right? You could also say it, in order for much to be given, much is required. So in other words, if you want wealth, power, influence, relationship, abundance, all of those things come at a price. You don't just get them like that. Family, abundance, security, love, passion, loyalty, all of those things are not free. And a lot of people don't want to do the work to earn them. And, you know, it's interesting for me. I've spent a lot of time studying people who've reached their highest echelons of life. And one of the things that fascinates me about people who've achieved success, and many of you won't be able to relate to this, but it's something that is a common occurrence among successful people. So when you achieve high levels of success, something happens which is a very bizarre thing. You get to a point which I call security. In fact, if you've seen my 6 stages of life, you will notice that on there is a stage called security. And what security is security means that you've worked to get something, but here's what happens. When you now have something, you also have something to lose. Right? And so a lot of people, instead of continuing to grow and to develop what they've got, what they do is they build walls around whatever it is so that nobody can steal it, so that it doesn't change. Let me bring this home. A lot of people haven't had a relationship. And so when they find somebody that they love, instead of developing the relationship so that they, for example, ask questions like, babes, what's your biggest fear? What do you worry about the most? Where should we be financially in 10 years? Where should we be looking to send our children? Should we start a family? When are we going to get married? Tell me something. What kind of world do you want to leave for our children? Instead of getting to a point where you actually talk about that kind of stuff, most people will talk about superficial things that anyone can know about their partner. You know, it's fascinating for me because a lot of people, if you ask them to tell you about their partner, they could tell you stuff, but all they can tell you are facts, things that anyone would know, but they don't know what their partner's fears are. And so what a lot of people do is when they get into the relationship, when they haven't been in a relationship for a long time, is that instead of growing it, they want to keep maintaining it. They want to put security around it, right? Because one of to go from security, the next stage of my 6 stages of life is what I call freedom, right? Freedom means that you get to a point where if you say something to your missus, you say to her, babes, look, listen, I have this kinky fantasy that I want to try, right? I want to try, I don't know, I want to try you dress up, I dress you up as a, I don't know, as a cop, or we dress up, or I don't know what crazy fantasies you guys are into, but my point being is, when you say that to your missus, she doesn't say to you, oh, you're a creep. Because what that does then is then you are not going to go, are you ever going to then suggest anything like that again? No, you're not, right? But that freedom is where you can come forward and share something about yourself which is going to leave you vulnerable, but the other person will accept you. But you can't even get to any of that unless you have the courage to be able to pursue it, right? And so now, let me circle back to the point which I began with. It all starts with really taking a very good look at yourself. Self-awareness. You actually have to think about this stuff. You have to analyze it. You have to pay attention. You have to journal. You have to write about it. You have to reflect. Let me ask you a question. In the last 1 year, how many times have you reflected on your life? And I mean, you've sat down and you've said, okay, so this is what I have learned from my life. These are the mistakes that I have made. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Let me take this further. So I was reading a fascinating book by a man called John Maxwell. John Maxwell said in this book that the reason why most people are failures in life is because most people, after they fail, what they do is that they're so quick to get up so that they don't look like they've fallen. You know, when somebody trips, what do they try to do? The first thing that they do is look around to see if somebody's actually seen them fall, right? Because they don't want, and then they get up and they would walk on and pretend like nobody has seen them falling, right? And nobody's seen their accident. Now, we've all been there and we can relate to it. I've done it myself. But the point that John Maxwell says is, no. Actually, when you fall, pick something up. Pick something up. Learn from your mistakes. Let me take this further. If you're listening to me right now, and you have been in 4 different relationships in the last 5 years, and every single one of them has ended, my question to you is, and here's where now I'm getting deep. Why? Something about you is off. There is something about your attitude, your behavior, your neediness, something about you. I didn't say that you're not worthy. I didn't say that you're not enough. I said something about you needs to be refined. Something about who you are needs to be drawn out. It needs to be worked on. What is it? Do you know what that is? Because now you could say, well, Cassim, hold on a minute. It wasn't my fault. Well, they broke up with me. I broke up with them. They were manipulative. They were always treating me like shit. They never paid attention. Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Okay? Before you continue with your little rant. It takes 2 to tango. Right? That person was, all those 4 people were attracted to you because something about you. If for the last 4 years, last 4 relationships, you've attracted cheaters, that tells you that something about you is drawing individuals who believe that they can take advantage of you, that they can lie to you. In other words, let me take this further. My God, I'm giving you guys too much. So I very strongly believe that if somebody is a liar and they lie to you and you say they shouldn't lie, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. Because a liar is supposed to lie. They're supposed to manipulate. They're supposed to be cheaters. So why are you saying they lied? They were supposed to lie. They were good at it. That's how they got away with it. Here's my point. If you've ever actually met a narcissist, right? One of the characteristics of a narcissist is narcissists believe that Well, if I've taken advantage of you, it's your fault. Because you were actually naive enough to not even notice that I was taking advantage of you. That's not my fault. That's your fault. Now, hold on a minute. You can be saying, Cassim, hold on a minute. That's not my fault that this person actually managed to go out there and try to manipulate me and cheat me and try to lie to me. No, 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 no. That tells you that there is something, you're not even aware about what's going on in your own relationship with yourself, right? Because slowly by slowly, this got out of the hand in 4 different relationships, but you weren't paying attention. You didn't realize. Until you just heard me say this, you hadn't even learnt the lesson. You hadn't picked something up. So my question to you is, are you reflecting? Are you journaling? Have you gone to see a counselor? Have you spoken to wise people around you about what constitutes as a good life, as success? My question to you is, if I came to you and we were having a conversation about success and I asked you to articulate to me how you define success, could you honestly tell me how you define success? Have you wrote it down? If we looked and I said to you, show me your list of goals. I want to have a look. Could you honestly articulate and show me the list of goals that you're wanting from your life? Now, I'm going to back up a bit and finish this point off with this. I would say to you that if you really want to go down this path, one of the elements that's required, and I very strongly believe this, is you have to become quite serious, right? If you actually look at people who are genuinely successful, who have an abundant lives, who have great family relations, these people aren't jokers very much. People who are serious don't joke about the importance of their family, right? I have a friend of mine who's like, I was saying to him, what are you going to do on the weekend? Do you want to work some extra hours? Because they were asking for people to work extra hours. And they said, why would I work on the weekend? I've got to go and watch my boy play football. And I said, yeah, but you could get extra hours. And he looked at me as if I was a nutcase. Like, how could I even possibly suggest that on the day that he's supposed to be going and watching his son play football, that he would work? Why would he work? He literally looked at me like I was a nutcase. And that is the degree to how the level of seriousness that you as a male will have to activate in your life to look at this stuff. Because to actually look at what is success, what's good, what's bad, none of this stuff you can really do if you're just like, well, Cass, it's not really that serious. You're too deep, Cass. Like relationships, I don't even care anyway. Family, yeah, they'll be there anyway. See, if that is your attitude, you can't do this stuff. Like, because why would you? Do you know what I mean? So that's the first note that I wanted to share with you on this topic, which takes me, let's continue going further down into this speech that Martin Luther King Jr. said. He then said this. He said that in order to build a great foundation for a great life, there has to be a deep belief in your own dignity, your worth, and your own somebodyness. Okay. So I'm going to break this down because that's way too complicated and there's too many things in there to just skip over. So let's begin with dignity. I researched the word dignity. Let me tell you what I found. So the word dignity comes from a Latin word called dignitas. Dignitas has a literal meaning to be worthy, right? So what dignity means is that it means that you are recognized for your humanity. You know, it's interesting. In a couple of days, what day is it today? Sunday, isn't it? Yeah, no. In 3 days, I'm going to be doing a talk on a subject around the death penalty. I've probably spent about 2 months looking at this subject because I wanted to say something about the death penalty and what I think about it and give my opinion on one of my shows. I have a show called So Opinionated, and I wanted to give my opinion on the death penalty. And the reason why it's taken me 2 months to get to the point where I can speak about this subject is because I have a problem. I have essentially 7 commandments. I have a list of 7 commandments, okay? These are commandments, like, you know, there are 10 commandments, right? Things you shouldn't do, or things that you should do. I have 7 commandments, which are commandments which I want to live my life by. And let me read to you what one of those commandments are. One of those commandments, in fact, it's actually the first commandment that I pledged on those commandments. It says this: to hold all human life with equal value, irrelevant of their actions. That is one of the commandments that I have. And so the issue that I have is, in order for me to allow for the death penalty, I would essentially have to accept that it is okay for a human being to take the life of another human being. And I've been having difficulties with this, because how can I agree that it is okay for a human being to take the life of another human being? I don't really agree with that. I don't really agree that one should be able to take somebody else's life, because the moment you start going down that route, irrelevant of whether you have a good enough excuse, you have a good enough reason, irrelevant of what they've done, you now get down a really slippery route and slippery road where it now becomes a subject of, like, I agree with you, I don't agree with you, how far is too far? It's a really huge problem. And so I would share with you that the reason why I have difficulties with this is because I very strongly believe that every single human being should have a belief within themselves that their life, irrelevant of what they've done, deserves respect, right? Look, guys, it's interesting for me, because the reality of life is that most people have grown up in a world where most people genuinely do not believe that they're worthy. Right? A lot of people have grown up in households where they've never been told that they're ever going to amount to anything, where they've never been told that they're ever going to achieve anything. A lot of people have not grown up in a world where they genuinely are who they want to be. You know, earlier on I told you about Britney Spears when I was studying her. And one of the problems that Britney Spears experienced when she was younger is that every element of her life was controlled. She got told who she was going to become. Every element of her life was literally already predestined. In fact, one of the notes that I wrote down here is that actually, I'll get back to that. Let me take this back a bit further. So, one of the things that I think is really important, particularly if you're a man, is men, we need to be respected, right? It's something that all men strive for, a desire to be respected. But you can't get respect if you don't even have respect for yourself, right? Because you wouldn't even know what it is. What did I write down? I wrote down a couple of weeks ago that you wouldn't know what something is unless you've seen what it looks like. In other words, you cannot identify what it is to be respected, or if somebody else is being disrespected, if you yourself do not know what respect means. If you yourself do not have respect, let me take this further. There's a lot of guys who are in relationships where in that relationship, you know it's no good. You're being mistreated, you're being abused. You know, I wrote in my first book that one of the biggest reasons why most people never fulfill their potential is because a lot of people genuinely allow people to step on them and allow people to abuse them, and they allow themselves to get into really shit relationships because they don't know their own respect. They don't respect themselves enough. In other words, they've never identified for themselves, if we get to this, if this happens, I can't go any further. I can't do it, right? If this person says this to me, if this person does this to me, I can no longer go further, right? I can no longer succeed. I can no longer interact. My question to you is, what would you be not prepared to, what would be so far that you would be willing to let go of your own family members, to not speak, to cut yourself off from your own mum because your mum did this to you? What is that? Because many of you guys don't realize that most of the violation that happens in families. You know, yesterday I did a speech and a sort of a rant, and I was explaining that when people phone up to say that somebody has been murdered, one of the first people that they suspect of having committed the murder is the person who called up. When the police are investigating the death, the murder of somebody, one of the first people that they look at is all their immediate family, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their brother, their sister, their mother. And I thought that's a really bizarre thing. Why would you be looking at family members, right, to the death of somebody? You should be looking to find some crazy person, some rapist, some paedophile, some drug addict person. That's who you should be looking for, not their own family members, right? Not their missus, not the person who's called up. But the reality is, it's almost always the person who phoned up or the person who's their partner or family member. Most of all the most devastating things are not going to happen or come from enemies or people outside of your own family. It's going to be people within your circle. And if you don't know have your own boundaries and you don't have your own dignity, the violation is going to destroy you. Because there are going to be people in your own family who love you, but they tell you you will never amount to anything. You will never be enough. I remember I was studying Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger's father told him that if he decided to become a bodybuilder and instead not follow in the footsteps of him to become a police officer, that he wouldn't be part of his family, that he would be nothing, he will never amount to anything. I mean, you think about that and you think, why would somebody say that to their own child, right? Who would say that to their own child? And it happens all the time. People say that all the time. I mean, you would be shocked, guys, at the amount of stories and books that I've read about successful people who say that when they were growing up, they told they will never amount to anything, they will never be enough, they're nothing, they're dirt. Who was I studying? I was studying a woman called, I can't remember her name now. Her name is kind of surpassed me. My apologies. But let's move on from her. But essentially, my point is that if you don't know have your own dignity and you don't know your own worth, people will tell you what it is. And that may not be in alignment with what you believe your worth, with what the capacity of your worth is. Let me put it like this. If you, metaphorically speaking, if you have got a Ferrari and the Ferrari gets on a motorway and everybody, and the Ferrari is driving at 40, but there is all these other cars which are like Fiat Puntos which are driving at 70, it would be very easy to believe that the Ferrari, if you didn't know the potential of the Ferrari, it would be very easy to believe that the capacity of the Ferrari is 40 miles an hour. It'd be very easy to believe that if you didn't know what the potential of a Ferrari was, right? But here's now where it gets interesting. If you take the Ferrari and you take it on the motorway and the Ferrari drives at 90, everybody else who is in the other cars believes that the Ferrari thinks is better than all the other cars, right? In fact, most of us say if you see somebody driving past us really fast, we think, well, they're idiots, they think they're so much better than us. The reality is capacity breeds hatred. People who are significant are hated. If you look throughout history and you look at people who've done great things or who are successful, they're hated. Nobody hates somebody who is doing worse than them. We all hate people who we fear, people who have the capacity to go higher, do more than us. You know, I say to people all the time that if you decide to follow what Michael Jackson said, which is that if you want to change the world, you've got to start the man in the mirror. If you go and actually start looking at yourself and you look in the mirror, everyone who can, when you look in the mirror, everyone who's around you will also be able to see themselves in the mirror, meaning that you will expose everybody around you, right? And people fear themselves. A lot of people don't like looking at themselves because a lot of people start to realize that they are lacking, they're making mistakes, and here's what's really the most scary one. A lot of people see their potential. A lot of people see their power. Power is a very scary thing. When you realize that you're powerful, it's a very frightening thing, because you now have to get into questions like, well, if I know that I can change my life, if I know that I have the ability to do amazing things, why haven't I not been doing them then? Now you've got another even bigger problem to tackle, right? So I would suggest to you that you really, as you begin to build your life and think about your life, really look at your dignity. The other thing that Martin Luther King Jr. talked about is he talked about this word worth. He talked about there's got to be a belief in your own dignity and your worth. I also looked up the word worth. Here's what I found. The word worth is a word that is to do with your value for yourself, right? It is a word which is to do with how much capacity do you think that you have? Because again, I said to you before that many of us grew up in a world where we've not really had anything be. Let me take this further. Let me go back a bit. Many of us have grown up in a world where we believe that the ceiling on our capacity and our potential is the people who is similar or below the people who we've grown up around. In other words, if our family members all have always lived in a cancer estate, the truth of the matter is most of us believe that must be our potential. But the reality of life is, and I think you'll agree with me when I say this, that where you started is not an indication of your capacity. It isn't an indication of your potential, right? In fact, opinion does not affect potential. If someone goes up to a Ferrari and says, I don't think that Ferrari can do 100 miles an hour, it's irrelevant. It doesn't affect its ability to actually reach speeds of 100 miles an hour. And the reality of life is that a lot of us have grown up in a world where the standard has been set for us by people around us. In other words, if everybody looks like they have a car and they all drive around 50, even if we're a Ferrari, we kind of just presume, well, that must be my speed. Well, that must be how fast I can go. But guys, we know that the Ferrari can go faster. And so actually that leads me to one of the big notes which I wrote down here, which is that in life there are defining days. And one of the most defining days for a male is the day that he either accepts his fate or pursues his destiny. My God, I'm giving you guys too much. I should be paid for this. Let me repeat what I've just said. I believe in life that there are life-defining days. And one of the most life-defining days for a male is the day that he either accepts his fate or decides to pursue his destiny. Every single one of us in life, if you look at our life, generally speaking here, I'm going to generalize, so don't try to attack me, I'm going to generalize. If we look forward at your life based on the way that you've been behaving, the things that you've been saying, your attitude, how much you've been studying, how much you've been growing, the people you have around you, we can kind of predict there or thereabouts how the next kind of 40, 50, 60 years of your life is going to look like. Now, I know many of you are going to say, Cassim, you shouldn't make such generalizations. People are all unique. I agree. But what we can say is that based on certain patterns and behaviors and habits, we can predict if that the person continues the way that they're behaving, we can predict there or thereabouts where they're going to be. That we can definitely do, right? But what we can't do is if the person's growing, if the person's developing, if the person's getting new insights, learning from their lessons, then we can't really predict where they're going to be. Because we know that growth is infinite. Growth can happen on a much bigger scale because it's not defined by the parameters of reality, right? In other words, productively, there's only so many hours that you can work. But if you start working on yourself, developing your insights, your attitude, that can go up 100-fold. There are no parameters which contain your growth. And so what I would share with you is, I wonder whether you've decided to accept the life which has already been laid out for you, or whether you're going to actually decide to go after your destiny. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because I very strongly believe, and I strongly believe this, that, how do I put this across to you in the best way that I can? I very strongly believe that most of us, and I'm generalizing again, just to articulate the point, there is always an exception to every rule, as we all know, right? I would say that the average human being, myself included, that most of us die at age 25 and are waiting to be buried. And the reason why I say this is because most of us, our life at the moment that we're living isn't based on our capacity and our potential. Our life is based on how we started our life. If you look at the way we started out, if, for example, we weren't good in school, that kind of has set the precedence for the way we're going to study, or whether we're going to study or not. I meet loads of people who say to me, well, Cassim, I was really bad in school. So I was like, okay, so why don't you read books now? Yeah, well, Cassim, I was really, when I was in school, I was always in bottom sets. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be a CEO now. That was then. Why are you talking about then? In other words, a lot of us, our lives have been a mixture and are going to be the results of the way our life started out. And the reality, guys, is that the way we start our life isn't really equal to the way our life is going to turn out, if we don't want it to, right? We can start our lives in foster care, being dickheads, being manipulative, cheating, lying, and then we can make the decision, no, actually, that will not allow me to exercise everything that I'm able to exercise in my life, the resources, the gifts, the talents, that are going to be at my disposal. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to have to become disciplined. I'm going to have to become articulate. I'm going to have to get good at sales, marketing, communication, hiring, right? I'm going to have to definitely look at my character. We can do that if we want to. The question is, do you? Can we predict your life, or are you about to set yourself on a journey where we couldn't possibly predict where you're going to be in 10 years? I mean, it would be ridiculous. Most of you guys can pretty much tell, no matter how good you think you are, it would be very difficult to predict where my life is going to be in 5 to 10 years' time. It's very difficult. You can kind of guess, but it's hard because I'm constantly developing, I'm constantly learning. I read 2 books every week. I'm going and interviewing people. I'm taking a course. I'm at university. Like, my life can't really be predicted because the level of growth that I'm constantly engaging in is exponential and is growing, and growth can compound far faster than kind of the path that is already been predestined for you. So I would ask you to really think about that. And I'll really ask you to really examine whether you're really following your path or whether you're following the path that people want you to follow. Let me finish this point off with one final thing. I very strongly believe that the biggest gift that any male can give his parents is the gift of becoming who they are capable of becoming. See, I used to think that the best gift anyone can give their parents is to become successful, is to be happy, is to give them grandchildren. That's what I actually used to think. But I found I was wrong, because actually, if you think about this, the biggest fear that parents have is, if I die as a parent, will my child be okay? That's actually their biggest fear. Will they find love? Will they find work? Will they be all right? That's what a lot of parents fear. And in order to alleviate that fear, you've essentially got to be able to prove to your parents that if you fall, you can get back up again. That if you get off track, that you'll be able to regain and come back on track. Here's a problem. You cannot exercise that if you're following the destiny that has your parents have already pre-set out for you, right? Let me take this further. I believe that we all have two kinds of dreams. The first dream is a dream that our parents dreamt for us. So in other words, if you're a parent or you've been around other parents, you will know some parents have, I want my child to be into football, I want my child to go to university, I want my child to play an instrument, I want my child to be into fishing, I want my child to, I don't know, get married before 30, I want my child to have children, right? Every parent has kind of a vision for their child. That's the first dream that everyone has. The second dream that we all have, which unfortunately most people don't activate in their life, is that we all have our own dream. The dream that we have for ourselves. And the truth is, in order to follow your dream, you would have to divorce the dream that your parents have for you. And so many of us have such a strong innate desire to get the approval of our parents that most of us never end up divorcing our parents' dreams and actually marrying our own. And so actually, if you look at many of the people who you know around you and you look at the dreams that they're following and the path which they're on, it isn't the path that they chose. This is not what they really wanted to do. This is what's going to get them approval. This is not what's going to cause conflict, right? And I say to people all the time that convention does not leave room for creativity. In other words, you can't do remarkable things and still fit in. You can't have an incredible marriage and still do what everybody else is doing, because the majority of people don't have great marriages. You would have to do something different that other people are not doing, because you've heard the saying, and I hate the saying, but doing the same thing in the same way and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity. It's true. You can't keep doing the same things. There is a saying that I say to people, which is that the apple does not fall far from the tree. It doesn't. If you actually look at a lot of people, they've become replicas of their own family, right? The child is exactly like the father. And I'm thinking to myself, how can the child be like the father? It doesn't make no sense. The child is an independent individual. They should be challenging their father. They should be have different philosophies. They should be having arguments with their father, with dad. How do you know that? Well, you know, one of the things that I say to males particularly is that there is a day, and it's a defining day. Remember I said that there are these defining days that guys have. One of the defining days that males have is the day when you see your parents not as parents but as individuals. A lot of people do not see their parents as individuals. When you see your parents as an individual, as a person, not as a parent, you will begin to see that they are making errors. And when that happens, one of the philosophies you will have to develop is that sincerity is not a test of truth. Just because someone loves you and they want the best for you, it doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean that they're true, right? For example, there's a lot of people, particularly when I talk about resentment, which I said I would talk about earlier on. One of the things that causes resentment in adults, particularly who are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years of age, is the fact that they're resentful because they're annoyed that their parent, their mother or father, did something when they were younger which they felt was in their best interest, but they did not think it was in their best interest. Well, you sent me to live with dad. You should have kept me with you. You sent me to live with mum, but actually I wanted to be with you, dad, when you guys got divorced. Well, when I was younger, my mum, all she ever did is she put me into every single club. My entire weekends, all I did was spend it in clubs. And I was in this club and in that club, and I was in this club on a Wednesday and that club on a Saturday. And so it's made me an overachiever. I'm an A-type. I can never, ever forgive people. I'm a perfectionist. I can never just relax. And that was all because of my mum. And I didn't want that. I wanted to just be a normal person. See, earlier on I said to you that resentment is a mixture of disappointment, disgust, anger, and fear. And the issue is, unless you follow your destiny and not the path that is being predestined for you, you will end up resentful. You'll end up angry because it's like, well, why didn't I get my turn? Why didn't you persuade me and push me to follow my dreams? Why is it that you weren't there for me when I was younger, right? You weren't there for me. You should have been there for me, right? And that is what leads to resentment. And that's why I said earlier on that the single biggest national relational crisis in Britain is resentment. Resentment causes more problems in relationships in Britain than any other problem. Because people they're angry and they're frustrated because they're like, well, why didn't you see it? You were the parent. Why didn't you ask me what path I wanted to follow? And now I've become a doctor, but it's the wrong path. Why didn't you expose loads of different cultures to me? Because now I have indignation. Because now I'm somebody who has a really negative attitude towards certain food, and I'm not open and I'm not adventurous, and I wanted that. And you stopped me from having it. That's how people become resentful of their parents. And that's why I say that actually the only truest way to give the greatest present to your parents, which is peace, which is when they die they can say he'll be fine, is to actually follow your destiny. To follow what you want to follow, what you believe in, what you define to be success. Just something that I wanted to share with you. Which leads us on to the next point that I wanted to say, which is he says, and this is Martin Luther King Jr., he says that you want to have a belief in your own somebodyness. The reason why, I think this is so important is because I went and researched this word somebodyness. It's a very unique word, but somebodyness is defined as the quality of being somebody who matters, somebody who's important, right? And I think this is so important because if you do not believe that you matter, you're going to have a lot of problems in life. Because if you have been somebody who's been around the world and you've lived life a little bit, one of the things that should be pretty obvious to you by now is life is going to punch you in the face. Like, I don't know what other way for me to put that, like, without me I don't want to give it some motivational sounding cool thing. The reality of life is, if you've been around for a few years on this planet, one of the things that you know is life is a bitch. It will punch you in the face. It is volatile. It is unforgiving. It is unfair. Like, it's brutal. Life can be absolutely brutal. And the reality is, if you do not believe that you matter and you don't believe in your own somebodyness, what will happen is that you will end up hopeless. And when you end up hopeless, you are going to get down a route and a path that is going, and I think leads so many males down a path where you're going to have despair, right? You're going to feel hopelessness. Hopelessness means no matter what I do, it doesn't matter. No matter what I do, it doesn't have any meaning anyway. So what does it matter? If I died, nobody would even care. See, if you listen to people who survived a suicide attempt, that is the rhetoric that they have. If you ask them, why did you try to commit suicide? This is what they say. They say things like, well, nobody would miss me anyway. My family would be better off. All of them use this kind of rhetoric. That is the mind. That's how they think when they're in that place. And so if you don't have that deep belief that within yourself, not externally, I'm telling you that life is going to beat you down to the point where you are going to literally be suicidal. Because if you actually want to live any kind of decent life, you're going to come across challenges, right? The reality of life is, if you really want to love and you really want an amazing relationship, you will have to do it at the risk of falling out of love. You'll have to do it. You cannot truly love somebody by having your walls up and defending yourself. To truly feel love, you will have to lay down the guards and expose your heart. But that comes with the price that then somebody can hurt you. They can betray you. And people will. And that's just the reality of life. And so it's important that you have your own belief. There is something that I heard Dr. There's a famous doctor whose name Dr. Phil say, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said, and he says this: sometimes in life you've got to make the wrong decision right. Something on the lines of that. But point being is, what he basically said is, sometimes you've just got to make a decision, and if it doesn't work out, you've got to make it right. Meaning that if you get into a relationship and you are betrayed, it's okay. It's okay, because you get into the relationship having the belief that if you are betrayed, if you are cheated on, if the person ends up going mental and it doesn't work out, as long as you know deep down inside of you, I will be okay. I'll be all right. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I will love anyway. I will go out there and try to create this bond, this relationship, this connection, right? But if it doesn't work out, I know I will be all right. I will cry for days. I will feel like shit. I will want to give up. But I know eventually I will be okay. If you believe that about yourself, then you can have permission to go out there and actually love people. Right? If you have that belief about yourself, you will be okay going out there and following your dreams, because you can say, well, if it doesn't work out with the dream, I can always go back and become an estate agent and do sales and go back to my corporate job. But nevertheless, I'm going to still pursue my dreams. I'm going to still go after what I want, what is important to me. And a lot of people don't have that. And I want to encourage you to start going down that path, because the reality of life is so many people are living their life based on preconceived ideas. A lot of us are basing our life based on our past, on our beginnings. So for example, one of the things that I wrote down here is a lot of people base their life on what they can do and their own somebodyness based on where they started. But the reality is, where you started isn't who you are, right? You are not your genetics. You are not your family history. You are not your belief system. You're not your behaviors or attitudes. You're not them, right? And I think this is important, because some of you guys who are listening to me, I was looking at some research, and I was doing some research on this. On average, if somebody has a family member who is in prison, they are 6 times more at the risk of ending up also themselves in prison. 6 times, right? More likely to end up in prison if they have a family member. Here's another one I looked at. I looked at the fact that we now know from all the research and data that depression is something which now can be passed on genetically, meaning it is intergenerational. You can get it from your parents. So we know, for example, that a child is 3 times more at risk of becoming depressed if one of their parents is depressed, right? We know that. And it's no surprise that a lot of people today are depressed, because we know now that we have a proclivity towards it. We have it within our DNA that it has to be, a bit like cancer, it can be activated. And so it's important for us to understand that we are not our genetics, right? Just because our parents were obese or they went to prison, that doesn't mean that that is our destiny. That does not mean that just because our parents had cancer, it doesn't mean that we're going to have cancer. Absolutely, we can have those genetics which need to be triggered, or certain circumstances and conditions need to be in place before they're activated. But that doesn't mean that that is a path that we're going to follow. It is possible for us to live a different, better, higher, more enriching life than the life that those before us have actually lived. And I believe very strongly that it's really important for us to get that and for us to understand that. to finish this off, I'm going to finish this off with what Martin Luther King Jr. then said. He said that there should be a determination to achieve excellence in your various fields of endeavor. Now, I want to break this down because there's a couple of things there that I want to talk about. The first thing that I want to talk about is determination. Number one, determination is defined as the ability to decide, to make a decision, to come to an end, to assert, to give direction, to define, to establish, to conclude, to come to a conclusion. What does that mean? That means in order to live a remarkable life, in order to actually think about your life, one of the things that you're going to have to decide is, what's your mission? What is your purpose? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? In other words, one of the things that you're going to have to come to a conclusion about is you're going to have to decide what you want to be really, really good at. You're going to have to decide for yourself what it is that is your conviction. You're going to have to decide what do you want to settle before you die. You're going to have to decide how you believe the world should be. And in order to do all of these things, one of the things that you have to determine for yourself is, what are you going to be competent at? What are you going to be really good at? Because we know that in the marketplace, in the world, that people pay for two things. When there is an exchange of money, we pay for stuff because of two reasons. Number one, because that thing is good value for money. So when we go to Primark and we buy a t-shirt that's like £2.50, we know that it's good value for money. We know that it isn't the best. We know that it could rip in 2 months or lose its colour, but we know it's good value for money. The second reason we exchange money for a service or for a product is because it's either the best or it is unique. Now, I was writing down some notes on what it's going to take to have an edge in leading up to 2080. In other words, I wanted to know, to have an advantage, to win, to put all the odds in your favor of living an abundant life, what are some of the things that are required? And one of the things that I ascertained was that to have an edge, you are going to need to become world class. You're going to need to become good. Like, I mean excellent. Like, I mean great at what you do. And the reality of life is, today, we need people who are really, really good at what they do. We need excellent plumbers. We need excellent doctors. We need excellent salespeople. And the reality is that we've grown up in a world where the standard from our parents is not excellence. Very rarely do I ever hear people using the word excellent, great, the best. We almost see it as these individuals who achieve these great feats are unique in some way. They're magnificent, they are godlike, right? They're these esoteric beings which we can never achieve the level of success that they have. And I encourage you to get away from that mindset, because if you really are going to live a remarkable life and set a really good foundation for yourself, you need to be able to commit a considerable amount of your time to one thing. And so you'll have to decide what is that one thing, because here's where I think it's so difficult for a lot of people. In order to excel in one thing, you're going to have to give everything else up. You can't be a great doctor and be a great surgeon, a great golfer at the same time. I spend a huge amount of my time studying people who are excellent at what they do. And I can share with you that these individuals usually are lacking in many areas. But there is one area in which they have their domain, their area of gifting, which they're absolutely excellent in. And the great thing is, when you are excellent in one area, you build a reputation, and that's how you get respect and all the other things. But much more importantly is doors start opening. the options that are available to you when you become excellent are much more different than if you're not very good, right? I was making some notes the other day about the fact that one of the problems that many of us face today is starting with zero. It is so difficult to start with zero. Zero is a very unique number because zero is it has no kind of association. When you have zero of something, you can't even build on it. When you have -1, you can go from -1 all the way upwards. If you have 1, you still have something to actually start to work with. But when you have zero, it is so difficult to do anything. And the reality of life is that a lot of us are just, in life, we're just zero at basically almost everything, right? We're just not good at anything, which means that opportunities just are never present themselves. One of the things that I say to people is, if you want to build kind of opportunities in your workplace, start doing more than you're paid for and watch what happens within a 6-month period. For a 6-month period, do more than what your job is paying you to do and watch what happens to the amount of opportunities. You have to understand that people who are in leaders of leadership, particularly if they're good, if they're true leaders, one of the things that they should be doing is they should be looking around to bring young people ahead. Because part of leadership, as I've said many times, is that you cannot call yourself a true leader unless you're building people up behind you to become better than you. And so if you're around a true leader, they should be looking for young people behind them to promote, to give opportunities to delegate to help become better. And one of the things that these individuals are always looking for is who is going out of their way, who is doing more than they're supposed to, who is outworking everybody, who deserves to be given more responsibility. And you don't get that unless you're doing more than you can actually handle. So that if you're doing more than you can actually handle, now you're put in a position where you can grow stronger. Do you see what I'm saying by that? And a lot of us, we're never in that position. Let me write down what else I wrote about here. I wrote down some qualities of excellence here, which I thought were interesting. I wrote down that integrity, passion, innovation, self-awareness, contribution. Isn't it interesting that when you begin to become excellent, one of the things that you also begin to touch now is greatness? Because you can't even worry about greatness if you yourself are suffering. It just doesn't even occur to most people, right? If you yourself don't have anything, how can you even think about greatness? Let me give you Martin Luther King Jr.'s definition, actually, of greatness. Here's what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said that not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great because greatness is determined by service. So what do you mean by that? Service. Service means that you take what you do, you scale it, meaning you take it and you expand it to the degree that you are now helping other people beyond your own family. See, you can't even reach greatness unless you're helping people beyond your own family. And most of us, we are not good enough to be able to build something to the degree where we have so much that we can now start thinking about other people beyond our own family. And when you become excellent at that, that's how now we can start building these incredible structures and these incredible infrastructures which we need in society. One of them being community. You can't build community unless people start thinking beyond themselves, right? Looking out for their neighbors, thinking, okay, what can I do to improve my neighbor? What can I do to improve the roads around us? Can I set up a community? What can I pay for some can I go and participate in a local workshop with the young kids around here to teach them how to get into business? That's how you start actually making the world a better place, by making yourself excellent. And I've got to tell you that the majority of men, this is not a foundation for them. Most men do not make it as a standard for themselves to be excellent, yet alone make it a standard for themselves to achieve greatness. I believe that if you will set yourself that standard, If you will look at your self-esteem, your self-worth, your value, your excellence, you look at your somebodiness, you really look at your dignity, right? If you will look at these areas and you begin to work on them, you begin to refine them, you begin to define them for yourself, you will become the kind of individual who will become valuable to the rest of us. And if you will become valuable to the rest of us, you are now onto the path for achieving greatness. You are now on the path to getting in the record books, to being remembered. You are now getting to the point where when people come to your funeral in, let's say, 100 years' time, obviously I'm exaggerating, that's a ridiculous number. Most people, roughly speaking, are not going to live past 100, especially if you're listening to me now. When people come to your funeral, they should be able to say, he was kind, he was loving, he did his best, he was there, he showed me how to be a better version of myself. He showed me what a human being is. You know, let me finish off with this. I believe that every single one of us, our life is always being compared in one of two ways. We're either being compared and being said, I don't want to be like that person. That is how humans, look at the depth, how low humans can sink, how low they can go, how evil they are. The other way is that we use human beings and say, wow, look how high I can rise. Look how loyal they are. Look how loving they are. Look how much they've done with nothing and turned it into something amazing. You can't control other people's opinion, but you can control the way in which you're perceived. And you have to decide for yourself, which one of those sides do you want to sit on? I personally would like to be on the path of people looking at me and saying, that's who you can become. But my question is, what about you? Have you thought about the contribution which you wish to make in this world? Have you thought about the mark, the impression that you want to leave on this planet before you die? So that finishes the notes that I wanted to share with you. I don't know whether it's been useful or not. I don't know whether you've kind of hit something within you and it's kind of set you on a path where you now begin to look at yourself, to think about your life, to think about what's important to you, to think about what you value, what is life, what is success. But I hope that it has. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Cassimotive on YouTube. That's where I put most of my stuff. And I want you to join our community, and I want to impress upon you many more of these kinds of words and messages so that you can become your highest, fullest expression of who you're capable of becoming. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.